Dungeons and coffee!
Greetings.
Hey, Gliston Fridmunder here. I'm going to show you how I'm going to make my Cannibal temple / fortress out of molded pulp. I'm going to use a couple pieces of this molded pulp. I'm going to glue it together and that'll give me more area, more surface for my structure. Here I've glued it onto this cardboard, this really thick cardboard. That's going to be my base. Now I'm going to take my glue gun and some scrap pieces from this molded pulp, and I'm going to fill in some of those unwanted holes and spaces. And then I'm going to go in later and add some windows and doors. Alright, so this project so far isn't taking very long at all. My next step is I want to make sure everything has the same sort of texture, and that's going to make everything blend in nicely. Here I've done so by blending in more molded pulp, and here I've went over top of that with some glue and toilet paper. So here you can see I'm trying to blend in the base with the texture of the structure itself, and I'm going to do that by blending it with some paper towel and glue. It depends on the structure you're going for. In this case, you can see that the toilet tissue tears up a little more. It's a little too thin. It's too delicate really for this project. So I just wanted to show you the difference between toilet tissue and paper towel, because the texture you get from that will be important depending on what you're trying to blend in. So for this project, paper towel is the way to go. It's more rough and it doesn't tear as easily. This temple has a history before the cannibals moved in, and that's the theme I went for. So we put in some steps, and later we're going to use some bamboo ladders. But for now, we're putting in some foam steps, as you see here, and I'm covering those foam steps with some of the toilet tissue. And that's going to blend that texture in again. Here's some of our bamboo baskets. Now, I've made these, I've used some toothpick, and I've used some coffee stirring sticks, and I sliced those in half. That way they're not too wide, and they look very delicate and very realistic. Super glue is what I'd recommend to use when you're making these baskets. I also use some small skewer sticks. I'm going for a bamboo look here, and I'll paint those accordingly, but we'll stick these on top of some of these little tower areas on the structure, because again, the cannibals have taken this temple over and they've kind of turned it into their own home / fortress. So they use these baskets to keep a lookout for caravans in the distance. Now with the toothpicks, to give it a more authentic look, I didn't like the point that the toothpicks already had on them, because it doesn't look natural. It's too pointy, it's too perfect, it just doesn't give me the look that I think makes sense. So what I do is I'll just break them in half, as you see here, and then I'll just kind of slice or hack some of that edge off with my utility knife, and that makes it look much more rugged. The flat sticks from the coffee stirrers, I use those for the inside of the frame, and then the roundness of the toothpicks or the skewering sticks, those I'll use on the outside for the rails. Now about those stirring sticks, they're not quite to scale. They're a little too wide if you use them as is, which you're welcome to do. But what I like to do, as shown here, is I'll cut off the tips, and they're super thin. They're super thin, so it's really the perfect width, even though they're made of wood. I'll take my utility knife and slice it down the center. And if that's not a perfect centered slice, that's okay, because that just makes it look more authentic. So here we go there. Now my coffee stirring sticks are perfect to scale. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this was once a lost and forgotten temple that was discovered by the cannibals in the desert, and they took that over. Well, when it was a temple, we had some bronze statues that decorated the spires of the temple. Well, the cannibals, of course, defiled those statues and, hacked them up and pushed them into the desert sands, and they're still lying in ruins around the temple itself. So, to get those statues, I'm just going to do the typical, to get those statues to look like bronze statues, old bronze statues, I'm just going to go through the typical technique. You can find this on a million different YouTube channels, people showing how to do this, but you just base in black, and then you dry brush the bronze or whatever color you want to do over top of that, and then we'll put a little bit of green on top of that, like a turquoisey green. So that's really the easy basic steps as shown here. And of course you wouldn't have to do this if you was making a fortress similar to this. I'm just taking those extra steps because with the theme I'm going for, this was a desecrated temple. Alright, as my statues dry, in the meantime you can see that I went ahead and I've spray painted the structure itself, and I'm going to take some baking powder, mix it with a little bit of glue, and I'm going to use that to kind of blend out some of the sharp edges around the top of the temple, and I'll also do that on the ground to help blend in the desert sand in with the adobe structure itself. Okay, the formula for the desert sand is quite simple. We have baking powder, black paint, and a little bit of water with glue. A little bit of water with glue. So we'll mix that together. I want it to look kind of grainy like this here. And that's going to help me give the texture I need, and then I can blend that in accordingly. Just like, I'm just going to use it like a plaster. I used to do a lot of drywall and plaster work with my dad, so I kind of have a background in that kind of work, so I'm going to apply some of that. We're just going to blend this in. We're just going to blend that in and make a happy little cannibalistic desecrated temple. And looky here, a happy little temple has a little spot under here. We need to get underneath there and make him happy. Okay, you get the idea. So we're going to blend that in. We're going to let that dry. Then we're going to put a couple more colors over top of that black. And that's going to give us that red desert look by the time we're finished. And this is just to show what I'm doing with those statues, the bronze statues. I made 4, or I should say 4 partial statues. Keep in mind they've been desecrated and dumped into the desert sands off of the towers of the structure. So they're partially buried in the sand and they're in ruins, and the white baking powder is around them. I did that so it'd give it that very fine grain look to blend in with the sand. When that dries completely, it'll be hard as a brick, and I'll go over that with some more paint. Alright, on top of the bamboo towers, these cannibals, if they're on watch, especially during the day, they're going to need some tarps or some hides to hide underneath out of the desert sun. Now, I'm out of aluminum foil, which is what I really need, but I'm going to do this batch with wax paper. And I'll put a link to a video that I've made in the past that shows in a lot of detail how to make authentic looking buckskin for your tabletop terrain. Okay, so after copious amounts of different blends of browns and reds, and our bamboo, our ladders and our towers, and this is pretty much what I've ended up with. I could have added more to it, but I'm kind of happy with this for now. Feel free to decorate and add as many extras as you feel fits your story best. This was a lot of fun. It was easy, and then I can reuse this really for a lot of different scenarios. And I can move these little ladders around as well. So there we go. This is the old temple that was desecrated and taken over by the cannibal cult of the Red Desert in Hyperborea. Kram!
Remember, keep your books off the table and keep reaching for the dice.